Today I am starting out the session on making a pieced block and applique quilt, my PB&A quilt. And I've talked about it with several quilts and shown several quilts that have pieced blocks and applique. And there is even a pattern on my website that you can download if you'd like to try it out. This is the pattern that's on the website. It's under shop, go down to complementary patterns, and you'll find the Joy quilt. The Joy quilt is a very small quilt that you can try out this kind of design yourself. Notice on the Joy quilt there's only like 5 strips, and my strips are gray and white, and I just alternated them. That's a pretty simple background, and so that's the first thing that I do when I'm making one of these quilts is I decide on my background. So this is what I did now. I just sewed these strips together, cut them whatever length you want. You don't even have to have them all the same length. You could cut some shorter or some thinner than others, however you'd like them. Another way that I have done it is using squares, and I showed some examples of half squares on my last video using the red smoke signals and the flower signals. Those were half square triangles. So here's what I'm going to be doing as I work through this whole project. I am going to use, instead of using strips like the Joy quilt, I'm going to use half square triangles. And I worked on this yesterday, so this is where I'm at right now. I have done this much. I wanted to show you another quilt that is an older one that is, again, it's pieced blocks and applique. The pieced blocks are all a bunch of squares, just squares. I think they might have been, they look like they're about 4 inches finished. You could make them whatever size you like. And as long as they are easy to piece together, I mean, if you make them all 4.5 inches, or if you cut them at all 4.5 inches, then they should piece together pretty easily. The thing that I did with this one is I just chose all sorts of darks, from blues to browns to reds. There's a purplish in there. Pardon me. So just whatever squares, and as long as they were dark, I sewed them together in the background. The thing that I like about this idea is this, taking if you're in a small group and you have 5 or 6 people and you all bring in certain fabrics that you want to use for a background, you could say, hey, let's all share some fabrics. I'm going to do mine with dark squares, and I'll give you a red square if you give me a blue square or something that you have. So it's a good place to kind of take those little scraps, don't need too much, and share them with one another and make a background. And then you can put some applique on top. This applique is quite a bit of applique. I made this quilt in 2006, so it's been a while, but it was very fun to do. Here is the one that I'm working on. And what I decided, I wanted to do half square triangles. So I first I don't want my triangles or my background to be too light, because in my mind, I'm going to use light words at the top. They're going to be white, I think. And so I don't want them to just mush in with the background. In order to make these squares, I took a dark square and here's a dark blue and a light blue square. I cut them at 5 inches, and then I put a line down the center, diagonal line. I'll use this. Well, this is not quite long enough, but you get the idea. And I'm sure you've done this. Well, I'm going to use the light side. It works better if you use the light side. I'm going to draw a line down from corner to corner. It works better if you have a long, there. And then you can use a pencil, or you can use a heat pen that goes away. And then you're going to sew 1/4 inch on the left side and 1/4 inch on the right side. Cut along the line, and I took mine and cut along the line, and I pressed the seam open. I really don't know if it's necessary, because I thought, well, I'm going to be putting stuff on top. It might be easier to apply the applique if I put it on top. I put these blocks together. After you draw a line, after you sew on each line, after you cut it apart and press, it doesn't magically become a perfect 4.5 inch block. Remember, I cut these squares at 5 inches. So they're going to be a shade bigger all the way around. So once I get them pressed, and I don't have a good example, but this is one that I have pressed, I lay it down and I use my rotary cutter and a square ruler. I lay the square ruler on top and trim all 4 sides, which for me with my arm has not been real easy, but I trim 2 sides just to get the edges up. I lay the diagonal line of my ruler on the seam, then I flip them around and I lay this on the other seam or on the seam again, and I trim the other 2 sides. So these have been trimmed and are now exactly 4.5 inches. So don't forget the trimming before you try to sew them into your quilt block. Okay, so these finished at 4 inches. I mean, they will finish at 4 inches. Right now they are 4.5 inches, and they are up here all ready for me to sew together. Another trick that I do when I'm doing a background is I stick them on my design wall, and then I go back and I look at them and I think, oh, well, maybe I think I don't want this one here. I'm going to put this one down here and put that one up here. So right now they're not sewed together, and I can go switching and switching and switching until I get something that I like. And oftentimes I find that I let a little time elapse before I think, okay, you have got to make a final decision here sooner or later. So I think it's always a good idea to step back from your project, at least for, sometimes I might step back for a day or 2 or even longer, do other things, and then come back and say, okay, I think I want to change this, this, and this. I use my phone sometimes also to step back and take a picture of, and then I will look at it later, because if you're back from your project, you get a better view. And if you have it on your phone, you can maybe, if something happens to it, you can pull it up and say, oh yeah, that's how it was. Before then, I actually sit down to sew. I also take a piece of, some blue tape, which I pull off, and okay, I pull this off, and I'm going to label my blocks, and I think I've showed this in another another video. But I always label them before I start sewing. This is block 1, 1, because he's in the first row and he's the first block. And I always put it in the same place so that I don't turn something around. So this will be block 1, 1. This will be 1, 2, 1, 3, 1, 4, 1, 5, 1, 6. This is 2, 1. And so this just keeps them together until I get time to sew them together, and then I can take those off and they're thrown away. But it keeps them from falling off, or you getting, when you have them on your table, getting them turned around and in the wrong position. So this is what my joy quilt is going to look like. I have different words that I'm going to use, and I've been working on how I'm going to do the words. So the next time I see you, hopefully I will have my words all ready, and I will explain how I do the words, and how I first do the words to get them onto the quilt. And then we'll also talk about the applique, what kind of applique we're going to stick on here. So if you'd like to join along, please do. We'd love to have you come along, and if you get some of your own wonderful designs, I'd just love to see them. Thanks for watching today.